Black CEO publicly mocked. By Mogul's wife minutes later, she took back the $4. 9B Tower. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. Don't touch that model. People like you don't belong anywhere near our tower. The words tore through the pristine white gallery like a blade dragged across glass, sharp, echoing, meant to wound. Conversations died mid-sentence. Champagne flutes froze mid-air. Even the sterile light pillars lining the room seemed to flicker at the impact of the insult. Miranda Hawthorne stood inches from the architectural model, her yellow gown blazing against the cold room like a warning flare. Her manicured finger jabbed the air with such force it nearly touched Nyla Carter's face. Guests in black tie attire formed a silent half-circle behind her, eyes darting between the furious socialite and the woman she was dressing down. Nyla didn't flinch. She stood poised in a deep emerald gown that draped down her frame like a calm, powerful river, a quiet contrast to Miranda's wildfire rage. Her posture was perfect, shoulders squared, chin slightly lifted, eyes steady, not cold, not angry, just unshaken. As if this moment, this humiliation performed under bright lights, had been rehearsed for her by the world many times before. Behind them, the $4.9 billion skyscraper model gleamed under the sterile lights. 4 twisting spires, glass steel ribbons reaching upward, a future skyline captured in miniature, a symbol of ambition, luxury, and legacy. And tonight, a battleground. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. Miranda's voice rose again, sharp enough to cut through the white walls. I asked you a question, she snapped. Who let you into this preview? This event is for investors, partners, and the people who actually matter. A few guests exchanged uneasy looks. Some watched with morbid curiosity. Some lifted their phones discreetly, but not discreetly enough. The room was becoming a stage. Nyla's gaze didn't shift, not to the crowd, not to the cameras, not to the woman spitting venom inches from her. She only breathed slow and deliberate, as if measuring the air to see how much of it she wanted to use to respond. Miranda stepped closer, lowering her voice but not its sharpness. Don't pretend you have business here, she hissed. She paused, letting her eyes trail deliberately down Nyla's dress, then back up with manufactured disdain. Decor, at best. And even that's generous. A ripple moved through the room. It wasn't quite a gasp. Not quite approval. Just shifting allegiance, the instinctive tilt of spectators, sensing drama but not yet picking a side. The gallery itself seemed to listen. A bright, pristine box of white walls, white floors, and towering panels of light that turned every expression, every misstep, every humiliation into something cinematic. The air was too clean, too sharp, like everything inside it had been curated except this confrontation. Nyla's fingers rested lightly on the black clutch she held, unmoving. She blinked once, then once more, not in weakness, in patience, in calculation. But Miranda mistook it for fear. Oh, don't look so fragile, she said, loud enough now for her audience to hear again. People come to these events to admire the architecture, not to wonder why the help is wandering around the VIP floor. The insult landed like a slap wrapped in satin. The shift began. It always does, that nearly invisible moment when the room stops being complicit and starts being curious. When eyes sharpen. When breaths shorten. When silence leans forward. The string quartet across the room paused mid-rehearsal. One of the servers froze with a tray of champagne. Even the security guards near the door straightened slightly, sensing heat. And Nyla finally moved. just a tilt of her head. Just enough to redirect all the attention, every stare, every lens, every heartbeat onto the stillness she carried like a crown. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Nyla. Miranda leaned in again, lips curled, drunk on the power of the room watching her. "You don't belong here," she whispered, this time with a smile sharp enough to draw blood. "This tower represents legacy, wealth, vision, everything you people never bring to the table." For the first time, Nyla's eyes shifted not out of anger, not out of hurt, but out of something far more dangerous: clarity. She lifted her gaze to the model between them. The shining spires, the mirrored glass terrain, the tower they were all celebrating. Her voice emerged soft, almost gentle. "I see," she said. That was all. Just 2 words, but the kind of 2 words that make an entire room inhale at the same time. Every witness could feel it. A change in the air pressure, like the room itself sensed something enormous shifting beneath the surface. And Miranda, oblivious in her fury, laughed with triumph, believing she'd won something she hadn't. The woman she mocked wasn't just a guest, not just a stranger, not just an inconvenience. She was the quiet owner of a storm she had not yet unleashed. And the night was only beginning. The room hadn't recovered from the shock of Miranda's outburst. When the curator of the event, a thin man in a silver suit and nervous smile, hurried toward the center of the gallery, hoping to diffuse what had already become the evening's first headline. "Ladies and gentlemen," he stammered, sweeping his hands toward the massive architectural model, "please direct your attention to the unveiling of the Hawthorne spire." But no one looked at him. Every eye remained locked on the 2 women standing on either side of the towering miniature skyline. One was trembling with offended entitlement. The other was still as marble, carved into calm precision. The curator's smile wilted. He stepped aside. In the lingering silence, the model itself seemed to glow brighter, casting reflections across the polished white floor. 4 twisting towers, all glass and steel, rising in choreographed motion. An entire ecosystem built into one shimmering vision. It was the kind of project that reshaped cities, rewrote skylines, and secured legacies. And it was why this room was filled with the richest people in the state tonight. But only a handful of them knew the truth. This wasn't the official public unveiling. This was the private preview, a room closed to the public, reserved only for Hawthorne's highest-tier partners, architects, and strategic investors. Everyone here had been pre-selected. Everyone, except, supposedly, the woman in the green dress. Miranda's voice cut through again, quieter this time, but somehow more venomous. "This preview is for people who have real stakes in the project," she said, crossing her arms tightly. "Not for spectators." Nyla's gaze moved slowly, deliberately, scanning the faces around her. The donors, the architects, executives in tuxedos with discreet gold pins, each symbol marking their tier of involvement. Some of them avoided eye contact. Others held it, curious, confused, unsure. Miranda mistook their discomfort for support. "She's not on the list," Miranda declared, addressing the room as if it were her courtroom. "Hawthorne family events require background checks, verification, standards." Nyla remained silent. The green of her gown, deep, elegant, luminous, contrasted sharply with the sterile white walls, drawing attention again and again. She didn't have to fight for the room. The room drifted toward her on its own. Near the far wall, a man in a navy suit whispered to his colleague, "Is she one of the architects?" His colleague shook his head. "No idea, but she looks important. Then why is Miranda going after her?" "Because Miranda goes after anyone who makes her feel small." Behind them, the plaque beside the model read, "Hawthorne Spire Pre-Launch Investor Preview Estimated Valuation, $4. 9. B. Under it, in smaller print, Principal Design and Financing Partners Classified. That word classified lingered in the air like a secret waiting to break. A security guard stepped forward, uneasy. "Mrs. Hawthorne, are you certain?" "Yes, I'm certain," Miranda snapped. "Remove her." His eyes darted between Miranda and Nyla. Something wasn't adding up. but he was trapped between obligation and instinct. The curator stepped forward again, sweat glistening under the gallery lights. "Mrs. Hawthorne, perhaps we should verify her invitation first," Miranda cut him off. "We shouldn't be wasting time. This is the single most important project of our empire. My husband has invested half our remaining capital into this tower, and I won't have it compromised by—" She stopped herself, but the implication hung in the air. The crowd felt the shift, the widening gap between arrogance and truth. A woman near the back whispered, "Who is she?" Another murmured, "Why isn't she defending herself?" A man in a tuxedo said under his breath, "Because she doesn't need to." Nyla finally spoke. Just one sentence. "I'm exactly where I was meant to be." Her voice carried without force, amplified not by volume but by certainty. It flowed through the gallery like a quiet note cutting through dissonance. Miranda laughed in disbelief. "And who exactly do you think you are?" Nyla's eyes turned back to the glowing tower model, the twisting spires, the mirrored surfaces, the future written in steel and glass. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Because the truth, the one fact Miranda had no idea she was screaming in front of, was simple. Nyla Carter wasn't a guest. She wasn't an outsider. She wasn't lost. She was the reason this tower existed at all. But Miranda would only learn that in the most devastating way possible. The whispers simmered across the gallery like low static, running beneath the sterile hum of the light pillars. They weren't loud enough to be called gossip, yet just the soft friction of curiosity. But Miranda heard every fragment, and each one made her spine stiffen a little more. She wasn't used to doubt in a room she believed she owned. Her heels clicked sharply against the white floor as she circled the architectural model, positioning herself between Nyla and the guests, like a gatekeeper trying to block a storm she didn't understand. Her yellow gown fanned behind her, a banner of warning. "Let's make something clear," she announced, lifting her chin. "The Hawthorne Spire is not a playground for strangers. This tower represents generations of old money, legacy, and refinement. Anyone allowed into this room has proven themselves worthy of that standard." Her eyes flicked to Nyla again, as if daring her to contradict the narrative. Nyla didn't. And that silence, that unwavering, unbothered silence, rattled Miranda more than any argument would have. Near the back of the room, Richard Hawthorne's senior advisor adjusted his cufflinks nervously. "We should confirm her identity," he murmured to a colleague. "If she's on the classified list, we cannot." "She's not," the colleague whispered back. "Miranda would know." But Miranda didn't know. Not about the list, not about the partners, not about the silent power behind $4.9 billion. She only knew what she'd always known. The world bent to her. She believed it now, too, right up until the universe started bending in the opposite direction. "Miranda," someone called softly from the investor group, "shouldn't we at least ask her name?" Miranda spun, smile stretched too tight. "Why should we?" The moment she walked in, it was clear she didn't belong. Nyla asked, her voice finally breaking the tension like a single drop of ink in clear water. Miranda froze. The room froze with her. Nyla's voice wasn't raised. It didn't need to be. It simply carried clear, steady, like truth spoken through tempered glass. "I find it interesting," Nyla continued, "how quickly you decided who fits into a space designed for vision, without knowing who stands behind that vision." The words were soft, but the weight of them hit the gallery floor like a stone. Miranda blinked, momentarily off balance. "What exactly are you implying?" Nyla didn't step forward. She didn't gesture. She didn't flare in indignation. She just looked at Miranda, a look that belonged to someone who had built empires in silence and buried opponents without raising her voice. "I'm not implying anything," Nyla said. "I'm observing." The investors shifted again, but this time the energy tilted, away from Miranda, toward the woman in emerald standing with the grace of someone who had nothing to prove. The curator cleared his throat nervously. "Mrs. Hawthorne, perhaps we should wait for Mr. Hawthorne before making any decisions. If the lady has an invitation, she doesn't." Miranda cut him off again, louder this time, steeling herself with the sound of her own authority. "She can't. This is a controlled preview, and every partner has been vetted personally by me." Nyla arched a brow. "Personally?" "Yes," Miranda snapped. "I review every investor, every architect, every executive permitted to step foot in this room. There it was, the miscalculation. A few guests swallowed. Others exchanged glances filled with silent, blooming suspicion. Because they all knew the truth, Miranda kept drowning in perfume and posture. Miranda wasn't part of the financial vetting. She wasn't part of the classified negotiations. She wasn't on the strategy board. She was decoration with influence, beautiful, loud, powerful by proximity, but not essential. Miranda, one of the senior architects, said gently, "Some partners chose to remain undisclosed. We were told certain names wouldn't be revealed until the launch." "Nonsense," Miranda shot back. "There is no partner here I haven't approved." A beat of silence. A long, heavy one. Then Nyla spoke calm as carved stone. "You're certain about that?" Miranda scoffed. "Absolutely." Nyla's gaze drifted back to the shimmering model, the twisting spires, the billion-dollar dream. "Then it seems," she said quietly, "you're not as informed as you believe." The investor's expressions tightened. The advisor's breath hitched. Even the security guard stepped back, unsure where authority truly lived in this moment. "And Miranda laughed, brittle and too bright. "This is ridiculous. You expect me to believe someone of importance would show up unannounced, unescorted, without credentials?" Nyla didn't answer. She simply stepped closer to the model, allowing the reflection of its shimmering towers to climb up the silk of her green dress, like a crown made of glass. The room followed her movement like she was the one pulling its gravity. And for the first time that night, Miranda felt something cold bloom behind her ribs. Uncertainty. A kind she had never tasted before. The uncertainty spreading through Miranda's chest grew roots, winding through her breath, her posture, even the way she held her chin. It was subtle, invisible to most, but not to the people who spent their lives reading power shifts. And tonight, the shift was happening in real time. She crossed her arms again, as if folding herself tighter could stop the room from slipping out of her grip. "Enough of this," she muttered. "Richard should have been here by now. He wasn't, and that absence wasn't an accident." The Hawthorne patriarch had never been late to anything involving investors, unless there was something he didn't want to face. The quiet panic vibrating through the senior advisors confirmed it. Richard's empire was cracking beneath its glossy finish, and this project was supposed to be his resurrection, which meant one thing: they needed every investor in the room. Every name, every dollar, every ounce of belief. Except the one woman he needed most was the one his wife was trying to throw out. Across the gallery, Nyla drifted her attention to a wall-sized blueprint lit by a cool white beam. Her eyes softened, not with sentiment, but with recognition. She traced the outline of the tower's central spire with her gaze, following the curvature of a design she knew too well. Because she wasn't just an investor, she was the silent force that had kept the project alive when Hawthorne finances nearly bled out 8 months earlier. But Miranda didn't know that. Couldn't know that, wouldn't have understood, even if she did. Instead, the woman in yellow took Nyla's quiet moment as an opening for another strike. "I'll ask you one last time," Miranda said, stepping forward so her perfume, thick and expensive, pushed into the air between them. "Who invited you into my gallery?" Nyla turned her head slightly, eyes steady but expression unreadable. "Your gallery?" A soft question, barely more than breath, but it carried through the room like a challenge wrapped in silk. Miranda's heels clicked once, a sharp punctuation. "Yes, mine. I oversee every event tied to this tower." "My word is decorative," murmured one of the junior architects before instantly regretting it. Miranda whipped toward him, scandalized. "What did you say?" He paled. I meant your involvement is highly valued." But the damage was done. The word lingered in the gallery like a spotlight swung at the wrong moment. Decorative. Guests shifted again, closer to the truth than Miranda realized, and closer to the real axis of power, the silent woman in emerald beside the tower model. Nyla let the moment settle. Her stillness wasn't passive. It was precise, measured, controlled. A stillness learned by people who had spent their entire lives being underestimated and had turned that underestimation into armor. She looked up at the shimmering model again. "Legacy," she said softly, "is a fragile thing. It only takes one moment, one decision, one voice, to rewrite the entire story. Miranda scoffed. Spare me the poetry. You think you can just walk in here and throw around words like you belong? This tower exists because my husband built this empire from steel and grit. Everything in this room exists because of him. That was the lie Miranda had believed her entire life. But the architects knew the truth. The advisors knew the truth. Richard himself knew the truth. And Nyla, more than anyone, knew the cost of keeping that truth hidden. One of the financial officers cleared his throat, voice uneasy. Mrs. Hawthorne. With respect, Mr. Hawthorne hasn't been leading the financial wing for months. The board made several strategic decisions regarding Miranda, cut him off, voice sharp with panic. Be quiet. We are not discussing internal matters in public. But it was too late. The words had slipped. The room had heard. And power, once cracked, never mends cleanly. Nyla's gaze drifted to the officer, offering him nothing more than acknowledgement, but even that made sweat bead along his hairline. She had the aura of someone who did not need to raise her voice for people to answer her. Mrs. Hawthorne, one of the investors finally said, if she is one of the classified partners, you may be jeopardizing something far bigger than Miranda spun, voice trembling between anger and fear. She is not a partner, I would know. Nyla spoke at last. No, she said gently. You wouldn't. The room held its breath. Every eye turned. Every heartbeat slowed. The gallery's white walls seemed to tighten around the moment, squeezing it until the truth pushed through. And Nyla Carter, the woman Miranda had tried to humiliate, stepped closer to the tower model, her reflection merging with the glass spires. Only then did she look directly at Miranda. Because the people who truly build empires, she said, don't need you to recognize them. A ripple of realization swept through the room, and Miranda Hawthorne felt the floor tilt beneath her stilettos. For a moment, silence lived in the gallery like a living thing, a presence with weight, breath, intention. It pressed against the white walls and echoed along the polished floor, settling in the space between Miranda and Nyla like a verdict waiting to be spoken aloud. Miranda swallowed hard, her confidence faltering under the sharp, suffocating awareness that the room no longer tilted toward her. Her yellow gown, once a symbol of social dominance, suddenly felt too bright, too loud, too desperate beneath the cool gallery light. She regained her volume before she regained her power. This is absurd, she snapped, trying to reclaim the energy. Anyone can speak in riddles. Anyone can show up and pretend to have authority. You want us to believe you're important? Then prove it. The challenge cracked through the room. A murmur followed, cautious, hesitant, but unmistakably curious. The advisors weren't watching Miranda anymore. They were studying Nyla the way scientists study the first tremor before an earthquake. Nyla didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't rise to the bait. Instead, she reached slowly into her clutch, the emerald silk catching reflections of the spires, glassy towers, and drew out a slim, matte black phone. Nothing dramatic, nothing flashy, but everyone in the room leaned forward anyway, as if the mere act of her unlocking the screen might shift the balance of the entire evening. It did. With a soft chime, a notification slid across the display, visible only to her, but the kind that carried immediate consequence. Extraction, protocol, prepared. Awaiting final command. Her thumb hovered, just long enough for the room to feel the pause, just long enough for Miranda to sense something was wrong. What are you doing? Miranda demanded, taking a half-step forward. If you're trying to call security, I've already. Nyla pressed one button. Quiet, clean, deliberate. A second later, the gallery's side door opened, not for security, but for a man in a charcoal suit with the expression of someone who lived inside rooms full of information. He approached the Hawthorne advisors, whispering something urgent. The color drained from their faces in unison. One of them stuttered, That can't be right. We weren't scheduled for. The man shook his head and handed over a tablet. A spreadsheet glowed across the screen. Numbers, contracts, investment streams, withdrawal notices, all time-stamped, all triggered, all irreversible. The advisor's voice cracked. Mrs. Hawthorne, there's been a full freeze on Tier 1 funding. Miranda blinked rapidly. A freeze? By who? Richard didn't approve. No, the advisor whispered. dread chewing through every syllable. This freeze overrides Richard. It bypasses all Hawthorne authority. Another voice joined, trembling. It came from majority control. Silence detonated. Majority control. The words rippled through the crowd like a revelation written in fire. Miranda's lips parted, but no sound came out. That's impossible. We hold majority. You used to, someone whispered. Nyla still hadn't moved, still hadn't raised her voice. Her phone hung loosely at her side, the screen dark again. Miranda staggered a step closer, voice cracking between fury and confusion. What did you do? Tell me what you did. Nyla finally looked at her, not with anger, not with triumph, but with something colder, truth. I activated a decision you handed me months ago, she said softly. The advisors stared. The architects stared. The investors stared. Miranda stared hardest of all. Nyla turned her gaze back to the tower model, letting her fingertips hover above the highest spire, not touching, just claiming. You wanted me to prove I belong, she said. Fine. She shifted her eyes back to Miranda. I own 40% of the tower. The room gasped. Before anyone could breathe again, she added, and this morning I acquired another 12. A pin dropping on the marble would have sounded like thunder. Now the math was simple. 52%. Majority. Control. Miranda shook her head violently. No. You can't just, no one acquires that kind of stake without your approval? Nyla asked, voice low. You said it yourself. You oversee what is decorative, not what is decisive. Miranda staggered back like the words had physically struck her. The advisors began pulling up logs, documents, timestamps, each confirming the same horrifying detail. Nyla Carter had just triggered a majority holder action. The Hawthorne spire no longer belonged to the Hawthornes. It belonged to the woman Miranda had tried to throw out. And the most devastating part? She had done it without ever raising her voice. Shock rippled through the gallery so violently it felt like the white walls themselves had inhaled. The calibration of power, once anchored to the Hawthorne name, now drifted unmistakably toward the woman in emerald standing beside the model she quietly owned. Phones lit up across the room like tiny, panicked stars. Investors checked emails. Architects checked memos. Advisors checked contracts. Every screen told the same story. Nyla Carter wasn't a visitor. She was the tower, its spine, its bloodline, its majority. Miranda's breath hitched. Her chest rose and fell in shallow, frantic bursts, a woman drowning in a room without water. This must be a mistake, she insisted, voice trembling. You can't possibly have gained majority. Richard would never. Richard did, one of the senior advisors whispered, eyes glued to his tablet. 6 months ago, he approved a silent investor's expansion clause. Whoever secured more than 10% of the new offering would unlock accelerated voting rights. Miranda's face drained to white. Why? Why would he agree to that? The advisor swallowed. Because the empire was collapsing. Because we needed the cash. Because no one else was willing to save us. And now, everyone in the room knew the truth. Nyla wasn't here to admire the tower. She was here to decide its future. Miranda shook her head slowly, as though denial itself might reverse the legal infrastructure unraveling beneath her feet. You tricked us, she hissed. The words came out small, almost childish. You came in here pretending you didn't belong. I never pretended, Nyla replied. It was the calmest sentence ever spoken in that room. She didn't raise her chin, didn't harden her tone. The serenity in her voice struck deeper than any threat could have. I walked in, Nyla continued, and you decided what I was, a simple truth. But it cracked open the entire social architecture Miranda had built her life upon. A murmur drifted through the guests. She said nothing, but Miranda kept attacking. She didn't even defend herself. She didn't need to. Miranda whipped toward them. Stop talking, all of you. Please stop. But no one listened. Silence had stopped serving her. From the far corner of the room, a glass door slid open, and a man rushed in, Richard Hawthorne's CFO, face red, tie crooked, clearly dragged from an emergency phone call. He spotted Nyla instantly. His shoulders dropped with something that looked dangerously close to relief. Miss Carter, he said, bowing his head. We received your command. The accounts are frozen. Legal is drafting the transition notice. Whispers exploded like sparks across dry leaves. Transition notice. Transition. Ownership shift. Miranda's world began to tilt. No, she breathed. No, this can't be happening. Richard would never allow this. He would never let you, the CFO winced. He signed the contingency clause. When? Miranda demanded. He looked at her with pity that hurt more than humiliation ever could. The day after the auction gala, the one you refused to attend. The realization struck her like a blow. She had thought skipping that meeting was harmless. Just another night of wine, laughter, self-importance. Instead, it was the night her husband handed their empire's throat into someone else's hands. Miranda turned back toward Nyla, eyes shimmering with a mix of betrayal and disbelief. You planned this, she whispered. You planned all of this. Nyla's gaze remained steady. No, she said. I plan to support the project. Quietly, respectfully. She stepped closer to the glowing spire model. Just one step, but enough to shift the gravity of the entire gallery once more. But disrespect, Nyla added, has a way of accelerating business decisions. The architects froze. The CFO swallowed. The investors stopped breathing. Miranda's lips trembled. You're doing this? Because of me? Nyla blinked once slowly. Because of your choices, she said. Not your presence. Miranda staggered back, as though the floor beneath her heels had softened into air. Her hand brushed the sleek edge of the display pedestal, steadying herself. You don't understand, she choked. This tower, it's supposed to save us. Nyla's expression remained composed, but there was no cruelty in it, only a cold, immaculate truth. It will, she said, just not in your name. A final silence descended, stunned, breathless, absolute. It marked the moment everyone in the room understood. The Hawthorne spire had just changed ownership. So had the future. The collapse didn't begin with screaming. It began with silence. A kind so total, so absolute, it felt like the entire gallery was holding its breath while reality rearranged itself in slow motion. Even the light pillars seemed dimmer, as if withdrawing their shine from the woman who had once commanded every corner of the room. Miranda Hawthorne stared at the CFO like Head just confessed to killing her future with his bare hands. You're telling me, she said, voice thinning to a thread, that my husband signed away control of our tower without telling me? The CFO didn't answer at first. He clasped his hands, eyes down, shoulders tight. The body language of a man caught in a political hurricane. He didn't want to alarm you, he finally murmured. He believed the clause would never activate. Miranda let out a brittle laugh. Well, it activated. The room flinched as her voice cracked like glass. But the investors weren't looking at Miranda anymore. They were looking at their phones, their tablets, their internal channels, all echoing the same notification rolling across their screens in synchronized devastation. Carter Ascension Group. Majority holder review initiated. In other words, Nyla Carter had taken the wheel. The Hawthorne dynasty had lost the car. A handful of investors stepped closer to Nyla, hesitant, deferential the way people approach a queen they didn't know they'd been living under. Miss Carter, one said gently, does this mean the project is being shut down? Nyla shook her head, her tone soft but immovable. No, the tower continues. Relief fluttered through the room, a weak breeze, but enough to steady trembling hands. Then she added, it continues under new leadership. Hope died again. Miranda gasped, like she'd been struck. You can't do that. You can't erase us. Erase you? Nyla tilted her head slightly, as if studying a puzzle. I don't erase people, Mrs. Hawthorne. I just remove their influence when it becomes corrosive. Miranda's fury resurfaced, but it was dampened, soaked through with fear, insecurity, and the dawning realization that she no longer had an audience. Her voice, once sharp enough to pierce marble, now sounded small against the sterile white walls. You think you're righteous? Miranda spat. You think humiliating me in public makes you the hero here? Nyla didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stepped closer to the model not to admire it, but to examine it with the familiarity of someone who had memorized every steel beam, every elevation, every curve. "I didn't humiliate you," Nyla said. "You performed that all on your own." The words were calm, measured, cruel only in their accuracy. A woman near the back whispered, "My God, she's not even angry." Another murmured, "That's because she doesn't need to be." The domino effect began. One investor excused himself to call his board. Two architects walked toward Nyla, offering cautious greetings. The CFO took off his glasses, polishing them like he needed clarity that his eyes alone couldn't give. And the whispers grew. What happens to the Hawthorne contracts? Does Carter Ascension restructure? What about the municipal permits? Is this a takeover? Every question spiraled into the next, forming a rising tide of panic that finally crashed directly onto Miranda. "This is my family's legacy," she cried, voice quivering. "You can't take that from me!" Nyla turned slowly. Her expression was not cold worse, it was compassionate, the kind of compassion that makes truth impossible to escape. "Legacy isn't inherited," she said quietly. "It's earned." Miranda stumbled back a step. Behind her, the advisors hovered like ghosts, silent, pale, aware their loyalties were shifting by the second. And the realization hit Miranda with brutal clarity. No one in this room would protect her. Not now. Not anymore. Desperation clawed its way into her voice. "You don't understand what we've lost," she whispered. Nyla's gaze softened just slightly. Not pity, not sympathy, but recognition. "I understand loss more than you think," she replied. "The difference is, I never used it as an excuse to harm someone else." The stillness that followed felt like the room was bowing to her, an involuntary acknowledgement of the moral and financial gravity she carried. And then the CFO cleared his throat, voice trembling as he read from the tablet. "Transition notice will be sent to all partners within the hour. Effective immediately. Operational control transfers to Miss Carter." Miranda closed her eyes, not in acceptance, in collapse. The soundless kind, the collapse of a woman whose world had been made of mirrors, now shattered at her feet. Somewhere behind her, a wine glass cracked against the marble floor as a guest tightened their grip in shock. Somewhere in front of her, Nyla stood tall, emerald gown shimmering like a storm forged in patience. And somewhere within the white walls, the tower model glowed brighter, as if finally standing under the light of its rightful architect. The Hawthorne era was over. What came next belonged to Nyla Carter. Nyla stepped toward the model, the gallery lights catching the emerald sheen of her gown as if crowning her in glass and steel. The advisors parted instinctively, not out of fear, but recognition. Her reflection rose along the tallest spire, merging with it, claiming it. "This tower," she said quietly, "was never built on your name, only your noise." Miranda stood frozen, breath shaking. Nyla touched the edge of the pedestal, a gesture light as air, final as law. "From this moment forward," she said, "the skyline answers to me." The gallery emptied in stunned silence, but Nyla remained a moment longer, standing before the model she now commanded. The light pillars framed her like a verdict delivered by the city itself. Beyond the glass walls, the night skyline shimmered a promise, not a prize. Nyla exhaled, calm and absolute. "Legacy is action," she murmured, "not entitlement." Then she turned, leaving Miranda amid the shattered quiet, and walked toward a future she had already claimed.